This is a test. This station is conducting a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is only a test.
James McMahon Music Podcast. James McMahon Music Podcast. James McMahon Music Podcast. James McMahon Music Podcast. He speaks to the geeks and the musical freaks, but sometimes popular but mostly a freak because he's James McMahon Music Podcast. James McMahon Music Podcast.
This concludes this test of the emergency broadcast system.
Right. Well, there's no way of starting this conversation without saying that your record is heavy. You know, it's I was just saying to your PR just before you got on the call that, and I sort of fudged how I said it. I said, "Oh, it really took the lungs out of mine." And what I really meant to say was, it took the air out of my lungs. Because I was spending some time with it this morning, and it's a hell of a record, man. How do you? I don't really know how to have this conversation, really, because firstly, I just want to say I'm really sorry that what happened to you and your partner. But also, is it a little bit difficult now you are, selling the record, talking about the record to people like me, to revisit that subject matter?
It is a weird one. It does feel, as you say, sensitive subject matter, and it's very personal. And I think when you sort of start off writing music for the album, you never think about this stage, really. You never think about what happens when the album comes out and stuff. And for me, the writing of music is a way to sort of help make sense of things and make sense of sort of situations that are sort of thrown at you in life. And so I think it comes definitely with, it comes with a bit of anxiety and nerves and talking about it. But at the same time, I think it's also healthy, and it's something that lots and lots of people go through. And I think it's, in a way, it's good to talk about it,
I mean, I agree with you 100% on that. I mean, I will say that, for the duration of the time we're talking, if I am in any way insensitive, I'm definitely doing my best. I find I'm one of these people that when you talk about things that are quite personal to people, I kind of end up saying something completely inappropriate, almost because I feel so awkward, So,
yeah, no, don't worry, man. It's all good.
Yeah. I mean, I will have mentioned this in the intro to the episode, but what we're talking about is that this record largely concerns a miscarriage you and your partner had. And it is interesting to me as a bloke that I don't feel like this topic is talked about enough, but I also think that when it is talked about, it is largely from the person who's had the miscarriage, like physically had the miscarriage. And actually kind of men don't really kind of talk about it anyway. And that kind of makes me think two things. One, is it a bit difficult for you as like an onlooker to talk about this and kind of still be respectful to your partner and what she went through? And also, is it kind of like how's it? I read you when I was doing a bit of reading in advance of this episode. I heard you talk about how it felt really to be an onlooker and how weird that felt, that all of those things you would quite like to do as a man, you can't really do. You kind of got to watch it play out in a way.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think what I discovered during the experience is it very much, in a way, feels like a sort of a woman's experience. And I think you do become this sort of witness to this thing, which is obviously a big part of you, but you don't have the physical experience, and what you perceive is what you sort of see and what you sort of feel. And I think it leaves you feeling a slight sort of loss of identity and put in this sort of place of deep confusion and sort of hopelessness. And I think the weird thing is also I'd never spoken to anybody about who had had a miscarriage or anything like that before. And then since having one, I realized that lots of people I knew had them. It's just, we just don't seem to talk about those things. And I think, as I said before, I think that the woman's experience is very much it definitely feels like that's the greater sort of more important experience. But I think the man's experience is a more sort of is quite confusing in a way. And I think what I've been trying to figure out is just who I am within that experience. And I think the album and writing of the album became a sort of map to figure out and sort of find a bit of a path through that experience. And yeah, music for me has always been that thing that when I can't, and I think it's the same for lots of songwriters, but I can't put into words really how I feel a lot of the time, and I find it hard to articulate my sort of internal emotions and feelings. And somehow with music, it does, just whether you're playing the guitar or just singing random words, I think it does release something, and I express things subconsciously that I didn't realize were even there. And it's for me, it's always been like this very sort of powerful thing, and I think it's really helped me just figure out the experience, I think.
Yeah, I find myself doing it with writing all the time. Like, I've had friends pass away in recent years, or had some kind of fairly heavy family stuff, and my wife is always like, just go write about it, you know. And I do, and she'll always say to me, I don't really know how you've done that. And I'm kind of like, yeah, it's like, things only really make sense to me at the other end of it. But it is weird how, because what you just said there about, you know, almost kind of not really being able to explain how you feel about things, or even understand what you feel about things, and how music kind of does that for you, songwriting helps with that. I mean, at what point of you as a songwriter did you realize that was that was something that songwriting provided for you?
I think, I mean, I remember, what was it? What would it be? I mean, probably just simple things, being a teenager and writing about sort of like, you know, your first sort of broken heart kind of situations, and playing like basic chords and writing simple lyrics, and getting this sort of release and slight sort of buzz, and that feeling, that sort of instantaneous feeling of satisfaction, sort of overpowering feelings of anxiety that I had prior to that. And then it became more of a thing when we started the band, and I experienced lots of sort of different things and difficult things as everyone does as you get older. And it became more and more of a sort of it became more and more of a sort of map and a way to see the world and to experience things, and to sort of clear my head and create a sort of sense of calm, and sort of ground myself in a way to who I really am. And I mean, I often think to myself, if I didn't sort of have that as an outlet, I don't know, I have no idea what I would do, or what sort of toll it would take on my mental health. It's a sort of scary thought to not be able to use that as a sort of crutch to get through life, really.
Yeah, I feel like you don't really get that if you pursue a career in banking.
No. Maybe you never know. Maybe there's someone who's like, God, do you know what? It's the perfect release for me. Probably not. Almost definitely not. But
I still feel like I want to meet that person. Actually, the person who is like screaming on the stock exchange, and that's actually what helps them make sense to their lives. I think that's quite an interesting story.
Yeah, the spiritual banker.
I think one thing about the record though is that in lots of ways I don't think it is all about, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it is all about the experience of miscarriage, because I think in lots of ways it almost feels like you know, I don't want to say concept record because it feels gross to say that, but it is almost like thematically it feels like it very much is about, you know, the experience of a miscarriage, but also the way that it brought you and your partner together, and the way that you grew as people as well, especially towards the end. If there's a lot of songs that are, you know, almost like if they were lifted off this record away from the sequencing of what came prior, almost like they would just be love songs. Is that, yeah, am I off base there?
No, you're spot on, and I think that's something I want to sort of like echo as much as possible, that the album isn't just sort of is just about this thing. It's really about sort of what happens in relationships when we have these moments, sort of earth-shattering moments, and how it changes and sculpts two people and how they sort of exist together. And my partner and I, we've been together for 7 years now, and we sort of met on the basis of a sort of traumatic experience. She went through a very traumatic experience right at the beginning of the relationship. So in this weird way, our relationship has sort of been born out of like this intense, difficult situation, and it grew and sort of blossomed out of this like intense experience that she went through, and it's sort of, in some strange way, it's something that we're sort of slightly used to. But I think I'm interested in what these things do to two people and what these experiences do to two people, and certainly with this one, you know, I think for lots of people it can make or break them, and with us we're a year on now, and we're, you know, stronger than ever, and you find such a sort of deeper level of love, I think, as cheesy as it sounds sometimes, when you go through these experiences, and it can really sort of bind you together, and it can test you to the, like, you know, to the brink of the experience. But it's been an important experience, I'd say, for us.
I had this thing when me and my wife got married. I'd had some, which I won't bore you with here, but I had some horrendous stuff in my life that happened prior to us getting married. And I remember us standing there saying our vows and almost kind of giggling, the two of us, because we were like, this seems a little bit over the top, because we've kind of already done this, you know, kind of those times in hospital wards or in, you know, kind of 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, sort of crying ourselves to sleep. That was almost like when the vows were made, you know. And I feel like that's almost a little bit kind of what you're saying, really, that thing of like how life can sometimes glue two people together. And in our case, we didn't need a piece of paper, really, because life had done it for us.
Yeah, you felt you probably were just so like intertwined by that point that it was just like, you can't imagine it being another way, really.
Yeah, I just remember that. I mean, it wasn't a religious service, but I just remember the person who was, you know, kind of getting us to read our vows and such, like, who's saying all this stuff about, you know, you will be there for each other and all that, and us just kind of looking at each other being like, yeah, I kind of done that now. Can we just get to the cutting the cake, you know?
Yeah, I bet. No, I could imagine that would be the case. And I think that would be the same for us in a way. You're like, you know, it's just, that just seems kind of irrelevant in a way. When you've been through stuff together and experienced stuff, you're so deep in it by then. It seems silly to talk of it in those terms. It's funny.
I love that song, Goodnight Farewell. I think musically it's really, really interesting, but also, I don't know, like, I imagine, I sort of try not to get too much into musicality on this podcast, which is weird for a podcast that's about music. But I sometimes think that actually it's about the, you know, actually trying to show who the people who make the music are. But one of the things I think is so interesting about that song is that I imagine sequencing the record must have been quite tricky, because, you know, it opens with a very arresting song. But like, how do you end a record like that is, you know, how do you sequence a record that is such a sort of emotional journey? Like, how much thought went into it, or what do we want to leave people with?
Yeah, it is a really tricky thing, and those conversations go on for like months and months, and it's complicated, really. But I think the album definitely, as you said, is not sort of totally like a concept album, but I think it was important that we sort of bookended it with a sort of outline of the journey, I think. And so the first one very much felt like you know, that subconsciously, I think we felt we needed to set the scene for the album and be quite direct as to what was happening. And the end feels like the sort of almost chronological journey of, it's the moment of sort of, it's like this letting go, and it's this ripping off your skin, and but this sort of almost like battle to sort of let go of the past and sort of move on, and that sort of painful, like ripping away from these past experiences and moving into something brighter and hopeful. And And that song, really, we came up with it in like one day in the studio. We just went in and we were like, we wanted to end the album with a song that felt like this, like this sort of just this sort of redemption from a song. It felt like this moment of sort of redemption, but like we wanted the idea of this sort of struggle to be in there still. So that noise and that sort of energy and that like ferocity was sort of feels like that's what it feels like, this sort of fight to let go of the past, and then that sort of delicate beauty in there as well. And but yeah, we wanted it to feel hopeful at the end, and I think that does like feel like this sort of like hopeful way just to like find a sense of peace, you know, maybe. Yeah, but that's my favorite song, that one, yeah, by a long way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. I also like that song, All We've Ever Wanted. I really like, I don't know, I guess that sort of quite a lot of the lyrics are quite direct, but that song does use quite a lot of metaphor, really. There's quite a lot of allegory is probably a better term, really. How do you but yeah, sorry, what I should say is that despite that odd sentence I just said, which is I like my lyrics to be very direct, but you know, how do you write your lyrics? Is it a case of, you know, because they're quite poetic?
Yeah, I think lyrics has been, I remember sort of starting writing lyrics, and it's all, I would make noise and make, you know, just start singing things and saying words, and words would come out. And the first songs always started in that way of just like, on our first EP, they're just like words that just sort of came out, and they came out in this sort of, in this certain way that felt sort of right. And at the time, I did never really like necessarily, I didn't know totally what they meant. But the weird thing is, over time, whenever that has happened, they make sense. I remember writing the first EP, and 6 months later, all the lyrics made sense to me, and I understood what they mean. And that's happened a lot over time, where it's almost just like you slightly tap into a sort of subconscious thing. And I find sometimes just making noise and going for melody, the words often come out. And over the years, I found this thing of like, as you sort of get a few albums in, you think, shit, my lyrics have to be more considered, and they have to be more sort of conceptual and this and that. And I, looking back, I always find those lyrics, I don't like them as much. You can feel they're more sort of forced and not really real. But the ones where I just like, I let the words come out, I feel like they're much more true to what I'm feeling. And a lot of them are just, I mean, some on the album are more considered, and I've sat down and spent time with the songs to write lyrics. But a lot of them are just, Good Night Farewell is one where it just sort of came out, blurted it out. And it's a weird thing. I mean, lots of them I've had weird moments of like in lyrics where things have come true, and very sort of scarily direct sort of lyrics where things have just like, I'll later just be like, oh my God, that thing actually happened. Or and I think I do believe you can just like tap into some subconscious thing and pull these things out of you if you just sort of like let it come out. And I'd say that's my sort of preferred method, really.
Yeah, I've got to be careful really now to sort of not delve into the realm of quantum physics and all the woo and all the woo woo shit that I kind of increasingly believe. But I do wonder whether some of this stuff is actually tapping into things about ourselves that we, you know, just that we don't know. You know, like it suppose like if this was, you know, the old days, you know, long before me and you were, you know, were even an idea, then we'd be talking about things like witchcraft and such like. But I do wonder actually whether it is tapping into something greater than ourselves, which explains something about ourselves. And as I said that sentence, I was like, you have got a bit woo woo there. I'm not sure Leo necessarily expected that when he started this conversation.
I'm all for that stuff, and yeah, some people can think that stuff's, you know, sort of nonsensey woo-woo stuff, but I just really believe in it. And I think there are ways to sort of tap into this stuff, and you know, like, I think we've got all these filters up inside ourselves where we sort of block ourselves from sort of getting to, you know, the real truth. And sometimes you can find ways just to like let that stuff come out. There are times sometimes when I'm singing lyrics and I'll just make lyrics up and I'll just stop for a second and I'll go, whoa. And I'll sing something that is so real and I've never wanted to say about myself, but it just came out. And it's a very sort of strange thing and it can sort of take you by surprise. But I think it's just like if you can let go and just trust. I mean, with you, maybe as a writer, maybe it's like probably something like putting the pen down, just writing non-stop. And like, have you ever done that or like seen what comes out if you just write and you can't stop writing kind of thing? Like,
yeah, I think they say automatic writing, I think is what they call it.
that was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of that really. I mean, what the first thing that makes me think is that, like, given your records to date, you know, like So Long Forever was like heavy, you know, like Afterlife, that was also, you know, that was hardly. Is there not part of you that feels a little bit like if you are almost coaxing future events, do you not feel like maybe, you know, maybe make a record about lying on a beach having a nice time? It feels like you deserve something.
Is
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it has occurred to us. I mean, I think we're hoping that the next record will be sort of hopefully be something a bit lighter. But the thing is, it's just that's the way it comes out, you know. And I think we can never really, you can't sort of plan it, and you can't. If we think in our head we're going to write a record like this, I just don't think it will ever work. It's just got to sort of come out that way. But I have to say, there is a part of me that thinks quite nice to write a sort of reggae beach album, you know.
Yeah, totally. But you know, like in fairness, like when you wrote Shoals, were you thinking, oh well, the next record might, you know, the next record will be lighter?
You kind of, yeah. I did think in my head it could be like that. But it's funny because in my head though, the albums don't feel. But I know why to people they do feel like that. But in my head, they don't feel necessarily heavy. It's funny. Like I think for me, I feel there's a lot of lightness in there as well. And even in this record, considering the subject matter, I feel like but I can't speak for everyone. And I definitely have had lots of people just be like, wow, they're pretty doomy records, you know. But like it's fun to write that stuff though as well, you know, and it's fun to play that heavier stuff. Sometimes the idea of playing an album that feels to people sort of lighter, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe not quite as exhilarating somehow.
I think also it's very apt for these times as well. You know, that's kind of what I thought with, you know, like Life After came out just before the pandemic, and then Shoals was basically sort of on the back end, really. Like, it's music for these times. I mean, you know, we are away from COVID and lockdowns now, but you know, the world is hardly thriving. You know, there is horror at every turn. It is kind of like your time, really. Those records almost, they soundtrack the age that we're in.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, the really cool thing for us is just people's response to the records, the fans who enjoy the music. They relate the sort of the things they pick up, or the themes of the records that are sort of the heavier things. They relate them to their stories, and then they turn into something very positive. So what we receive from the gigs feels like this very like cathartic experience we have with our fans, which is like an incredible thing. And there's a lot of like crying at our gigs because people are tapping into their experiences that they can relate to, but they're sort of crying and then like releasing this thing, and they're smiling, and there's like, it's a really like amazing thing, sort of playing music that does sort of connect with maybe more of the sad stuff in people's lives. I think that probably is true. But it feels very positive when it's in a room all together, even though people are crying.
What do you do when you see someone in the front row crying?
It's we sort of got used to it, but at the beginning, I remember just being like, just forgetting words and being like, you know, what's going on? Like, but it's a really strange thing. I think in a way it makes you want to sort of I don't know, it makes you sort of connect more with also what you're singing. And because over time, sometimes the songs, obviously, you lose a bit of feeling for what the song was about. And I think when you see people reacting to it in that way, I think I connect again more strongly with what the songs are about. But yeah, it's a very surreal thing seeing people crying at the shows. It's better than yawning, I suppose.
If I was your manager and I had like a, you know, sort of a caricature of a music industry manager, and I had a ponytail and was, you know, counting my cash, I would be saying to you at this point, do you think that maybe we should do some Palace branded tissues for merch? I feel like you could make a bit of a killing there.
Wow, that is a very good idea. I might have to suggest that actually.
Yeah, look,
We'll give you a
I mean, given I'm trying to do this episode before the free Zoom runs out, which at this point I'll say, if anyone who listens to this podcast would like to subscribe to the Patreon, that would be very useful. I will take a cut. It can be a low cut, it can be 1%, 2%, but yeah, feel free. But bear me in mind there. Chuck me a bone.
I feel like that is actually a great idea. We could have them on the merch table before they go in. Grab your tissues, and yeah, no, that sounds great.
Well, at this juncture, I've just been reminded that I'm running out of time. So I think now is probably a good time to wrap up. But Leo, thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I'm so sorry that you went through this. I think this record's really special, and I'm looking forward to spending even more time with it. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
All right, man. Take care.